You'll stop pleasing people after this. What if I told you that everything you've been taught about being kind, considerate, and well-liked is actually destroying your life? What if the very behaviors you think make you a good person are the exact same behaviors that make others lose respect for you, take advantage of you, and ultimately dismiss you as weak? What if I could show you why people-pleasing isn't kindness at all but a form of manipulation that everyone can see through, and why the moment you stop doing it, everything in your life will change? Today we're going to destroy every assumption you have about people-pleasing, and by the end of this video you'll understand why continuing to seek everyone's approval is not only destroying your self-respect, but actually making you less likable, less respected, and less influential than you could ever imagine. This isn't about becoming mean or selfish. This is about understanding a fundamental truth about human psychology that most people never learn. Respect is not earned through compliance, and love is not earned through self-sacrifice. The first brutal truth you need to understand is that people-pleasing is not actually about pleasing people. It's about avoiding the discomfort of potential conflict, rejection, or disapproval. When you say yes to things you don't want to do, when you agree with opinions you don't share, when you laugh at jokes that aren't funny, you're not being kind or considerate, you're being selfish. You're prioritizing your own comfort over authentic connection. You're choosing the temporary relief of avoiding conflict over the long-term respect that comes from being genuine. Think about this carefully. When you people please, who are you really serving? Are you actually making the other person's life better, or are you just trying to avoid the anxiety you feel when someone might not like you? The truth is that people-pleasing is one of the most selfish behaviors imaginable because it's entirely focused on managing your own emotional discomfort rather than creating genuine value for others. Real kindness sometimes requires saying no. Real consideration sometimes requires disappointing people. Real care sometimes requires letting others face the consequences of their actions rather than rescuing them from discomfort. When you can't do these things because you're afraid of how others will react, you're not being kind, you're being cowardly, and everyone around you can sense that cowardice even if they can't articulate it. The second brutal truth is that people don't respect what they can always count on getting. When you're always available, always agreeable, always willing to sacrifice your own needs for others, you become predictable, and predictable things lose their value. Think about supply and demand in economics. When something is abundant and always available, its value decreases. When something is scarce and difficult to obtain, its value increases. The same principle applies to human relationships and in respect. When you always say yes, your yes becomes meaningless. When you never disagree, your agreement becomes worthless. When you're always available, your time becomes insignificant. People start to take you for granted, not because they're bad people, but because you've trained them to believe that your attention, time, and energy have no real cost. The people who command respect and admiration are those who are selective about their time, careful about their commitments, and willing to say no when something doesn't align with their values or priorities. They understand that their scarcity creates value, and their boundaries create respect. When these people do say yes, when they do offer their time or energy, it means something because it's not guaranteed. The third brutal truth is that people pleasers are actually harder to trust than people who are sometimes difficult or disagreeable. This might seem counterintuitive, but think about it logically. If someone always tells you what they think you want to hear, how do you know when they're being genuine? If someone never disagrees with you, how do you know their agreement is real? If someone is always accommodating, how do you know they're not just manipulating you to avoid conflict? People who are occasionally difficult, who sometimes disagree, who are willing to disappoint you when necessary, are actually more trustworthy because you know that when they do agree with you or support you, it's genuine. Their occasional resistance makes their cooperation meaningful. Their willingness to risk your disapproval makes their approval valuable. People pleasers, on the other hand, create a constant undercurrent of uncertainty in their relationships. Others never quite know where they really stand or what the people pleaser actually thinks or feels. This uncertainty doesn't create closeness, it creates distance. It doesn't build trust, it undermines it. The fourth brutal truth is that people-pleasing actually makes you less attractive to others, not more. Humans are biologically programmed to be attracted to strength, confidence, and self-possession. These traits signal genetic fitness, emotional stability, and the ability to protect and provide. People-pleasing signals the opposite: weakness, insecurity, and emotional instability. When you constantly seek approval, you're broadcasting to everyone around you that you don't approve of yourself. When you always accommodate others' needs above your own, you're signaling that you don't believe your own needs are important. When you agree with everyone, you're showing that you don't trust your own judgment. These behaviors trigger unconscious responses in others that make them less likely to respect you, trust you, or want to be close to you. The most attractive people are those who clearly know their own worth and don't need others to validate it for them. They're selective about who they spend time with, what they commit to, and how they invest their energy. This selectivity doesn't make them arrogant, it makes them valuable. It signals to others that earning their attention, time, or affection is an achievement worth pursuing. The fifth brutal truth is that people-pleasing is actually a form of dishonesty, and everyone can sense when you're being dishonest, even if they can't consciously identify what's wrong. When you say yes but mean no, when you smile but feel annoyed, when you agree but actually disagree, you're lying. And these lies create an energy that others pick up on subconsciously. Have you ever been around someone and felt like something was off even though they were being perfectly nice? That feeling often comes from sensing the disconnect between what someone is saying and what they're actually feeling. People pleasers create this disconnect constantly because they're always performing a version of themselves rather than being themselves. This dishonesty doesn't just affect how others see you, it affects how you see yourself. When you constantly betray your own feelings, needs, and opinions to avoid conflict, you lose touch with who you actually are. You become so focused on being what others want that you forget what you want. You become so practiced at suppressing your authentic responses that you stop knowing what those responses are. The sixth brutal truth is that people-pleasing attracts exactly the wrong kind of people into your life while repelling the right kind of people. When you're always accommodating, always agreeable, and always available, you become a magnet for users, manipulators, and people who are looking for someone to take advantage of. These people can sense your inability to say no, and they will exploit it ruthlessly. Meanwhile, strong, healthy, confident people are often repelled by people-pleasing behavior because they recognize it as weakness and manipulation. They want authentic relationships with people who can stand up for themselves, express their real opinions, and maintain their own boundaries. They don't want to be around someone who's constantly performing for their approval because they understand that such behavior is exhausting and inauthentic. The result is that people-pleasers often find themselves surrounded by energy vampires, narcissists, and people who take more than they give, while the healthy, balanced people they actually want to attract keep their distance. This creates a vicious cycle where the people-pleasers' relationships confirm their worst fears about themselves, while providing none of the genuine connection and respect they're actually seeking. The seventh brutal truth is that people-pleasing is actually selfish and manipulative, even though it masquerades as selflessness. When you constantly try to manage other people's emotions and reactions through your behavior, you're attempting to control them. When you say yes to avoid someone's disappointment or anger, you're trying to manipulate their emotional state rather than allowing them to have their authentic response to reality. This manipulation extends to your motivation for people-pleasing itself. You're not doing nice things because you genuinely want to help others. You're doing them because you want something in return: approval, acceptance, avoidance of conflict, or a sense of being needed. This transactional approach to relationships is fundamentally manipulative because you're not being honest about your motivations. True selflessness would involve doing what's actually best for the other person, even if it makes them temporarily unhappy with you. True care would involve letting others experience the natural consequences of their actions, rather than constantly rescuing them. True kindness would involve being honest about your own limitations and boundaries, rather than pretending you have none. The eighth brutal truth is that by trying to please everyone, you end up pleasing no one, including yourself. When you constantly compromise your own preferences, values, and needs to accommodate others, you become a watered-down version of yourself that lacks the distinctive qualities that make relationships meaningful. You become generic, bland, and forgettable because you've smoothed away all the edges that make you uniquely you. Relationships thrive on authenticity, including authentic disagreement, authentic boundaries, and authentic differences of opinion. When you remove these elements in an attempt to be universally likable, you remove the very things that create depth, interest, and genuine connection. You become someone who's easy to be around but impossible to really know or respect. The ninth brutal truth is that people-pleasing is ultimately unsustainable and will eventually destroy your mental and physical health. The constant stress of monitoring other people's reactions, suppressing your own needs, and maintaining false personas is exhausting on every level. Your body wasn't designed to live in a constant state of performance and self-suppression. People-pleasers often develop anxiety, depression, chronic fatigue, and physical health problems because they're constantly in a state of internal conflict between what they feel and what they express.
This conflict creates chronic stress that manifests in both psychological and physical symptoms. The longer you maintain people-pleasing patterns, the more damage you do to your overall well-being. The 10th brutal truth is that the approval you're seeking through people-pleasing is ultimately worthless, because it's not based on who you actually are. When someone likes you because you've molded yourself to their preferences, they don't actually like you. They like the performance you've given them. This means that no matter how much approval you receive through people-pleasing, it will never feel satisfying because you know it's not genuine. Real approval, real respect, and real love can only come from people who know who you actually are and choose to value you anyway. This requires you to show up authentically, with all your flaws, boundaries, and imperfections. It requires risking rejection by being genuine, rather than guaranteeing acceptance by being fake. Now that we've established why people-pleasing is so destructive, let's talk about what actually works. The alternative to people-pleasing isn't being mean, selfish, or inconsiderate. The alternative is what we might call authentic consideration. This means caring about others while also caring about yourself. It means being helpful when you genuinely want to help, not when you feel obligated or afraid to refuse. Authentic consideration requires developing what psychologists call differentiation. This is the ability to remain yourself while still being connected to others. It means you can care about someone's feelings without taking responsibility for managing those feelings. You can be considerate of their needs without sacrificing your own needs. You can maintain connection while also maintaining your individuality. This differentiation is what allows healthy relationships to exist. When both people can remain themselves while caring about each other, you get genuine intimacy rather than codependence. You get mutual respect rather than one-sided accommodation. You get real love rather than transactional approval seeking. The practical application of this means learning to say no without lengthy explanations or apologies. It means expressing your genuine opinions even when they differ from others. It means setting boundaries around your time, energy, and emotional resources. It means allowing others to be disappointed when your choices don't align with their preferences. Most importantly, it means accepting that not everyone will like you, and understanding that this is not only okay but necessary. If everyone likes you, it means you're not being yourself. It means you're being whatever you think others want you to be, which is exhausting and ultimately unfulfilling. The people worth having in your life will respect your authenticity even when they don't always agree with your choices. They'll appreciate your honesty even when it's sometimes uncomfortable. They'll value your boundaries because they understand that people without boundaries can't maintain healthy relationships. The transition away from people-pleasing isn't easy because it requires facing all the fears that drove you to people-please in the first place. Fear of rejection, fear of conflict, fear of being alone, fear of being seen as selfish or mean. These fears are real, and they need to be acknowledged and worked through rather than ignored. But the alternative to facing these fears is continuing to live a life that isn't really yours. It's continuing to sacrifice your authenticity for the illusion of acceptance. It's continuing to attract people who don't really know or value you while repelling those who might genuinely appreciate who you are. The moment you stop people-pleasing, several things will happen. First, some people in your life will react poorly because they were benefiting from your inability to say no. These reactions will be uncomfortable, but they're also informative. They'll show you which relationships were based on your compliance rather than mutual respect and care. Second, you'll experience a sense of relief and authenticity that you may not have felt in years. The exhaustion of constant performance will lift, and you'll rediscover who you actually are underneath all the accommodation and adjustment you've been doing. Third, you'll start attracting different kinds of people into your life. People who are drawn to authenticity rather than compliance. People who respect boundaries rather than trying to violate them. People who want genuine connection rather than one-sided service. The ultimate truth about people-pleasing is that it's based on a fundamental misunderstanding of how respect and love actually work. You cannot earn genuine respect by being constantly accommodating. You cannot inspire genuine love by being endlessly self-sacrificing. You cannot create authentic relationships by being inauthentic. Respect is earned through consistency, boundaries, and the courage to stand up for your values even when it's difficult. Love is inspired by authenticity, vulnerability shared appropriately, and the security that comes from knowing someone is choosing to be with you rather than feeling obligated to please you. When you stop people-pleasing, you give others the gift of knowing who you really are. You give them the opportunity to choose you based on your authentic self rather than your performed self. You create the possibility of real relationships rather than transactional ones. You also give yourself the gift of self-respect. When you honor your own boundaries, needs, and values, you develop a relationship with yourself that doesn't depend on external validation. This internal relationship becomes the foundation for all your external relationships, creating a stability and confidence that attracts healthy people while naturally repelling those who would take advantage of you. The choice is yours. You can continue exhausting yourself in the futile pursuit of universal approval, constantly sacrificing your authenticity for the illusion of acceptance. Or you can choose the more difficult but ultimately more rewarding path of being genuinely yourself, accepting that not everyone will like you, and trusting that those who matter will respect and value your authenticity. The people who will love and respect the real you are out there, but they can't find you if you're hiding behind a mask of people-pleasing. The life you actually want is waiting for you, but you can't live it if you're too busy living the life you think others want you to live. Stop pleasing people, start being yourself. The difference in how you feel about your life will be immediate and profound, and the quality of your relationships will improve in ways you never thought possible. The respect you've been seeking through accommodation will come naturally through authenticity, and the love you've been chasing through self-sacrifice will find you when you finally become someone worth loving, yourself.